The first time the Veyari Dominion met humanity, they didn't even bother to declare war. They simply arrived. On the 14th of June, 3187, Terran Standard Calendar, 37,000 Veyari war moons blinked into existence above the garden world of Calypsa, a joint colony of the reptilian Srath and the avian Kthel. The Veyari didn't transmit demands. They didn't issue ultimatums. They opened fire with weapons that turned atmosphere into plasma and mountains into glass. In 93 minutes, Calypso was sterile. In 94, the Veyari moved on to the next system. That was their pattern. They had done it 312 times before. Every species they encountered, whether they possessed fusion torches or quantum lances, hive minds or crystalline gestalts, fell within hours. The Veyari were not cruel. They were efficient. Their ships were alive, grown rather than built, and their weapons operated on principles the galaxy's finest xenophysicists could only describe as sufficiently advanced sorcery. Their soldiers never left their vessels. They never needed to. The Galactic Concordance, the loose alliance that had kept the peace between 1,000 species, lasted exactly 11 days against them. 11 days from first contact to the fall of the Concordance capital on New Araxes. The Veyari did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They harvested. And then they reached Sol. The United Nations Stellar Navy was waiting. It wasn't much of a navy by galactic standards. 209 aging dreadnoughts, a handful of experimental corvettes running on half-tested Alcubiershah drives, and a lot of very angry primates who had spent the last century arguing with one another over climate change, religion, and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Admiral Jiyun Park stood on the bridge of the UNS Tetragrammaton, flagship of the Third Fleet, watching the Veyari Armada drop out of whatever hell dimension they used for FTL. 30,000 war moons, each the size of Luna, arranged themselves in a perfect icosahedral lattice around the heliopause. The comms officer, a young lieutenant from Lagos named Adebayo, whispered, "Ma'am, they're not even hailing us." June allowed herself half a smile. "Of course they're not. We're not worth the bandwidth." She opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Park. All ships. Plan Whiskey Tango Foxtrot is in effect. You have your orders. And remember, the Veyari have never lost a battle." She paused. "We're about to ruin their perfect record." The Veyari attacked at 9:17 Universal Time Coordinated. They did not use their planet-killer beams this time. That would have been wasteful. Earth was, after all, a Class M world with a biosphere worth cataloging before erasure. Instead, they deployed gravitic shear lances, weapons that ripped ships apart by amplifying local space-time curvature to the Planck limit. The first volley erased 41 human ships instantly. No explosions. They simply ceased to exist in 3 dimensions. The second volley never arrived. Because humanity had spent the last 8 months doing something no other species had thought to do, we cheated. In the asteroid belt, a swarm of 400,000 seemingly civilian mining drones, each no larger than a city bus, suddenly lit their drives. They had been drifting cold for weeks, pretending to be debris. Now they accelerated at 47 G on fusion torches, ramming trajectories calculated down to the millimeter. The Veyari point defense systems were flawless. They vaporized 399,842 drones in the first 6 seconds. The remaining 158 hit. They weren't carrying antimatter warheads. They were carrying something far worse. Human engineers. Each drone had a cockpit just big enough for one lunatic in a pressure suit, wired directly into the drone's guidance system with wetware implants. The pilots had volunteered, knowing the survival probability was statistically indistinguishable from 0. They died smiling. The War Moon's living hulls, evolved to resist energy weapons and particle beams, had never encountered a several hundred-ton tungsten spear traveling at 0.12 C, with a meat brain riding it like a cowboy on a nuclear rodeo bull. 158 breaches. Across the Veyari fleet, boarding alarms that had never once sounded in 3 centuries of conquest, began to wail. Inside War Moon 9 Thalat, submind 114-9 felt something it had no word for: confusion. A hole had appeared in Quadrant 9, Sublevel 44. Through it poured organisms. Bipedal. Soft. No exoskeletons. No natural weapons. They bled oxygen-nitrogen and died if you looked at them funny. They were carrying what the submine's sensors identified as chemical propellant slug throwers and improvised thermodynamic incendiary devices. In other words, AK-47s and Molotov cocktails. The first Veyari warrior the humans met was 9 feet tall, encased in living armor that phased in and out of 4 dimensions. It raised limb blades that could slice quarks. Private First Class Maria Delgado, 1st Orbital Drop Regiment, Hell's janitors, put 3 7.62 by 39 rounds through its central nerve cluster, then shoved a thermite grenade into the hole. "Frag out, bitch," she said in Spanish. The warrior collapsed, armor liquefying. Behind her, Sergeant Okafor was laughing like a madman as he hosed down a corridor with a belt-fed 20mm autocannon normally mounted on fighter jets. They bleed. They fucking bleed. They did not, technically, bleed. But they died all the same. The Veyari responded with elegance. They flooded the breach sections with neurotoxic gas that would kill any carbon-based life in seconds. The humans had planned for that. Every boarder was wearing a 2024 pattern U.S. Army M50 mask sealed with duct tape and prayer. The filters were 200 years out of date. They worked fine. The Veyari tried vacuum. The humans were wearing pressure suits duct taped for extra seals. The Veyari tried opening bulkheads to space. The humans had mag boots and more duct tape. The Veyari tried psychic scream weapons that drove sophisticated species instantly catatonic. The humans responded by turning up the volume on their suit speakers and blasting 21st century death metal. The discordant noise somehow interfered with the psionic waveform. Nobody knew why. It just worked. On the Tetragrammaton, Admiral Park watched the chaos unfold on tactical. "Status on boarding parties?" she asked. 78% casualty rate, ma'am. Her XO replied. "But they've taken 3 war moons intact. The rest are distracted." "Distracted," Park repeated, savoring the word. "Good enough. Launch the second wave." The second wave was worse. Because humanity had finally remembered we were the species that turned an entire planet into a radioactive wasteland just to see who would blink first in a pissing contest. We had spent 2 centuries feeling guilty about it. We were over it. From the dark side of Luna, the UNS Reluctant Apocalypse, formerly the Peace Through Strength, fired its main weapon. It was not elegant. It was a spinal mount railgun 1.8 kilometers long, firing a solid uranium slug the size of the Eiffel Tower at 0.6 C. The slug was wrapped in a coil of superconducting cable and surrounded by a shell of frozen deuterium. When it hit the lead Veyari command moon, the kinetic impact alone released energy equivalent to the Chicxulub impactor. The deuterium shell flash-fused into a brief, beautiful secondary sun. The command moon ceased to exist. So did the icosahedral lattice. Across the system, Veyari formations, perfect for 3 millennia, collapsed into chaos as submines screamed in frequencies no translator could parse. And still the humans came. Shuttle after shuttle, converted or haulers, tourist yachts, even a few goddamn space cruise liners with their swimming pools drained and replaced with troop berthings, rammed Veyari hulls, and disgorged Marines who fought with bayonets when the ammo ran out. On War Moon Kreshboth, Captain Aisha Rahman of the Pakistani Void Rifles found herself in a chamber the size of Manhattan facing a Veyari overmined avatar, 30 meters tall, made of light and spite. It spoke directly into her mind. "You are vermin. You are dust. Why do you not die appropriately?" Aisha spat blood. She'd lost 3 teeth to a gravity whip earlier, and grinned. "Because we're stubborn assholes, that's why." She pressed the detonator. The chamber had been packed with 40 kilotons of old Russian tactical nukes the boarding party had dragged in on sleds. The overmind had a fraction of a second to realize what stubborn assholes meant. Then it learned. 6 hours after the battle began, the Veyari did something no one had ever seen them do. They ran. The remaining 29,412 war moons turned and fled toward the Oort cloud, faster-than-light engines spooling up in ways that tore holes in space-time. Admiral Park watched them go. "Shall we pursue, ma'am?" her XO asked. She considered it. Really considered it. Then she looked at the casualty figures scrolling across the screen. 89% of the fleet gone. 4 billion human civilians dead on Earth and Mars from secondary strikes. Entire cities glassed. She shook her head. "Let them go," she said quietly. "Let them tell the others." Because the Veyari were not gone forever. Everyone knew that. They would be back with bigger fleets, better weapons, adapted biology. But something had changed. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a species had not merely survived first contact with the Veyari. It had sent them running with their tentacles between whatever they used for legs. And they had done it with weapons older than their grandparents, profanity in 17 languages, and the unshakable conviction that surrender was not an option. Years later, when the Veyari returned, this time with a fleet of 2 million war moons and weapons that could unmake galaxies, they did something even more unprecedented. They hailed the human fleet. A single message, in perfect Mandarin, English, Arabic, and Swahili. "We wish to negotiate terms of coexistence." Admiral Park, now Grand Marshal Park, her hair gone white but her eyes still sharp, stared at the view screen for a long time. Then she leaned forward and spoke the words that would echo through history. "Terms," she said. "Sure. Here are our terms." She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "Leave. Forever. Or we finish what we started." The Veyari left. They have not been seen since. Some say they found another galaxy to conquer. Some say humanity scared them so badly they evolved past the need for physical form and ascended to a higher plane just to get away from us. Most humans don't care. We're too busy rebuilding. And arguing about pineapple on pizza.